I think I was trained as a child from moving so much, how to handle stress and how to be resilient. I'm very proud of how I handled stress. That's one part of the gift of what God gave me from moving a lot as a child. I'm incredibly grateful for is that resiliency. The way that my brain is wired is find the solution. And even if the solution is not anyone else's solution, it's going to be my solution. And if it makes sense, then let's do it. And so I don't really bask in feeling like a victim for very long at all. Like it might hit for a second and then I'm like, okay, solve it. Let's go to solving it. So there's really not a whole lot of emotion other than processing the initial shock. And then after that shock is processed, I go straight to how do we fix it? So, and if other people in the world, in my world, are just not at that point yet, I like to just fill it in and fill in the blanks. I mean, somebody has to. I'll just jump in the driver's seat and I'll fix it. That's what happened with COVID. And I agree, COVID, I don't think it created the cracks. I think it brought the cracks to the surface.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Britney Valas. Britney is the founder and president of Empower You Incorporated and the creator of the TRIGGERZ Transformation System, a practical framework that turns emotional storms into structured pathways for nervous system regulation, emotional healing, and neural pathway growth. As founder of Shaw Enterprises, she leads a transformation consulting firm that serves companies and organizations with fractional strategic leadership and corporate wellness solutions, carrying the same tools from youth and adults in crisis to leaders in the boardroom. She is also the director of partnerships over national accounts for a Phoenix-based commercial general contractor. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Britney.
Britney, welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate being on.
It's going to be such a fun conversation. We met through Corey Bloom and had coffee, maybe 2 weeks ago-ish. And we could have talked forever. You have a fascinating, you got saints in your family, Al Capone relationships. You got ties to the Daily Show. You got 5 kids as a single mom. You started your own company. You're doing stuff with another company. You have your own not-for-profit. You do CrossFit. So this is all in my wheelhouse, except I've never been a single mom of 5 kids. But anyhow.
It's a great job. You should try it sometime. It's fun.
You're pretty out there. You have your own podcast, that Get Curious. But people that know you fairly well, Britney, what thing would surprise them about you?
I feel like they could probably tell you I surprise them frequently. Even as well as they know me, there's always a surprise that kind of turns up. It's always an evolution. I don't sit still for very long, just in my soul and spirit. It's always evolving. And so 6 months from now, we'll talk and you'll probably see a different version than the person sitting before you right now.
What's the latest surprise for them?
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. Things always work out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting if there's an unknown or something that we're waiting on. Just went through a modification yesterday and it all worked out. So it's always kind of fun to see like things work out. So I guess it depends on circumstances. It feels like every single day is the equivalent of 1 year. So you'd have to probably narrow down a week and pick a day.
Where did you grow up and what was fun for you growing up? What you love doing?
Okay, so I was born in Kansas City. I lived in Kansas City until I was 9. And then through my family, we moved quite a bit. We moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and finished high school and college there. Started my career. Met my former husband in Nashville. He lived in Memphis. So I moved to Memphis to be with him. And together with our family, we moved to Hickory, North Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina, and then did that whole loop over 30 years and came back to Kansas City in 2019. So probably my favorite part of growing up in that way is I did enjoy experiencing culture and subcultures and getting to learn people in different parts of the country, because Milwaukee, Wisconsin is vastly different than Chattanooga, Tennessee, especially in the teenage years. And Fort Wayne's very different than Louisville, Kentucky. So I feel like just the experience of that started the foundation of, even now as an adult, travel is my favorite thing to do, or just experiencing different cities so I can get to know, what it's like in the culture and what just the different vibes, different accents, little fun words people say. So I got to really experience just a lot of different types of people and experiences through my upbringing.
What was the reason of the constant moving after you moved out of Kansas City?
Yeah, so my parents have been married for 46 years, I want to say, for a very long time. And when they started the family, it's my brother and me, they decided the structure of how they wanted to operate. And my dad was in IT, and he could kind of pick up and really support my mom with whatever she wanted to do. And so she, in the 80s and 90s, she's one of those women that broke every glass ceiling and started as a receptionist in healthcare, never went to college and didn't even graduate high school. And so she ended her career before retiring as a chief operating officer in healthcare. So to make that happen in the 80s and 90s, it required a lot of moves. And just, if a division shut down and another one opened up, or, a greater opportunity. And we supported my mom. So it was wonderful to see her thrive.
Yeah, I mean, from a receptionist to COO, that's a fantastic career. And your dad was, probably more progressive, maybe compared to other males in terms of his support for your mom, it sounds like. Thus the reason probably they've been married for 46 years.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We actually had this conversation yesterday on my way to CrossFit. You mentioned CrossFit. And she was recalling a story to me that, gosh, I guess it was in the 90s, before we moved to Fort Wayne. So I must have been 8 years old. So it was in the 80s. And she was told by a male counterpart that she would never make more than $45,000 a year. Like, just accept it. She was never going to make more than $45,000. And then years later, he went and saw her corner office with the big desk, and he was like, wow, you really made it. And she, just was really humble about how she handled it. Yeah. But she gave credit to my father, and she said, if it weren't for my father believing in her, and in the moments she was a little bit nervous or insecure, like, can I do this? He believed in her more than she believed in himself. And she really credits all of the success to my dad, because if it weren't for him and his support and unconditionality, she could have never made it. It was it's funny, we just talked about that yesterday.
The guy that said your mom would never make more than 45,000, that's why men get a bad name. A lot of us are pigs, but that's all right. So again, in looking at your profile, your bio, your LinkedIn, I mean, you were so strategic at an early age. Like, most 17, 18-year-olds have no idea what they want to do. Like, they just pick a major, myself included. Like, I'm going to pick a major because I'm going to get a job, but I have no plan. But like, talk about your strategic plan to get a job 7 years later. So you start a plan at 17 years old.
Well, I will say, going back to the people that know me really well, I've always beat to a different drummer. I guess, is that the saying? I beat to my own drum.
Yeah.
As a young child, I knew that I wanted to help people. Like, that was always that was my goal. I used to pretend to be a doctor with my brother. I used to pretend to be a teacher. I didn't know how, but I knew I wanted to help people. At age 13, I was watching the Surgery Channel and hip replacements because I thought I was going to be a doctor and maybe I could be a pediatrician. And I had this really core soft spot in my heart for children. In particular, I started babysitting at age 11. And so when I was 16, my parents, they set the foundation, and they said, if you want to drive, you have to pay for your own car insurance and you have to pay for your own gas. So you need to get a job. And so I did. My first job was at Kmart. And within a few months, they put me in the pharmacy and I loved it. It was a great fit. By the time I was 17, I self-studied for the Certified Pharmacy Technician program, which you can go to college for a couple of years. I did it in 6 weeks. I holed myself up in a hotel room in Knoxville for 2 days and passed it with flying colors. And so very quickly, I proved myself. And at that time, the regulations are very different than now. But I was compounding medication. I was calling doctor's offices. I was counseling patients that were 80 years old. Ordering inventory. I literally did every single thing a pharmacist does at age 17 without the liability. And so I loved that. And I have the way that I look at life, it has to be efficient. And we try to, take kind of an outside the box thinking. So I thought, well, I have this experience. How can I help people through this experience? And so I thought about going to pharmacy school, but I didn't want to feel trapped in a small space, 10, 12 hours a day. Yeah. So I knew that wasn't going to work with me. And so then I learned about pharmaceutical sales reps just through working in the pharmacy. And I thought, well, I can do that. Why don't I do that? So I learned, what I needed. So I thought if I get a degree in marketing, that takes care of that. I have my experience in the pharmacy, that takes care of that. I'll need sales experience. So right after college, I'll go and I'll get a sales job. I'll knock that off. And then I'll become a pharmaceutical sales rep. And my goal was really to provide service to doctors so they could help their patients. Like I genuinely believed my purpose was serving patients and serving doctors. And it took 7 years, and that dream did come to fruition right after I moved to Memphis to be with my former husband because we both worked at Enterprise together, so we couldn't continue working there. And so I applied for Bristol Myers Squibb, and I got the job within 2 weeks, which was unheard of at that time. Normally took a lot longer, but it just kind of happened. That's kind of the repeating theme in a lot of my stories. It just happened. So it just kind of happened. And I loved it. Within a year, I realized very quickly it did not give the fulfillment I was trying to get at. I mean, I was 24 years old, this girl, and I realized quickly reality of how much I'm actually able to be in that value position of providing service to doctors. Doctors, they already knew it was a very different position than what I thought it was going to be.
Right. Right.
So I ended up leaving after a year, and the timing worked out because I got pregnant with my daughter, and so I ended up staying home with her. So it all worked out. But yes, I had a 7-year plan, and it worked. It came to fruition.
Like you knew what you wanted to be, and picked the right major, graduated in 3.5 years. I mean, I just think it's amazing in terms of that. Just curious on the, I always like to know how people get their first job after college or high school if they didn't go to college. How was that process, and how did you get the job at Enterprise?
It was a 4-interview process. So you had the interview with the recruiter first. I believe it was up in Knoxville. Back then, this is before Zoom or any of that. It's like 2002. And after that, interviewed with, I think the next person was the branch manager in Hickson, Tennessee. So that went well. I believe her name was Lee. I think was her name, an Asian woman. She had a fascinating story. She came from Cambodia. So she had a childhood in the jungles of Cambodia. But so I interviewed with her, and she was wonderful. And then the area manager, you have a third interview with recruiter, branch manager, area manager. And then the fourth interview was with they had a position called a regional vice president, and then they also had a one right beneath that. And I believe I did it with the regional vice president with Neil Hafer. So he had just come on board in that region at the time, and I got the job offer, and it went great. It was a wonderful career. I love the company. They have amazing bones for a management training program. It's kind of like a condensed MBA program. I credit a lot of the way that I think in business to Enterprise. Just the training. If you follow what the training is, at least back then, I'm sure it's changed over the last couple of decades, but back then, at least, it was so formidable. And I followed what they taught me, and I followed it to a T. And so 7 months in a row, I received the honor of being a CTE winner. And at that time, I surpassed every record for that region. So I hit 7 times in a row, the number 1 salesperson in the region. So we had the MVP dinner up in Knoxville, and I got to drive the wrapped PT Cruiser. That was part of
yeah, right. The PT Cruiser.
I got to do that for a month. And was promoted within 6 months to assistant manager, and I moved to Knoxville for that position. From there, promoted very quickly to branch manager of Crossville, Tennessee. So I drove an hour and 15 minutes one way just to be a branch manager because I lived in Chattanooga at that time. Went back to Chattanooga and then was promoted to the airport location as a branch manager and had, I kind of went back and forth. I'm like, do I give up the dream as a pharmaceutical rep to just stay with enterprise because this is such a good company? And like, do I just stick with this route? And they believe, oh my gosh, the people I worked with at that time, they really believed in you. I had never received, I wasn't expecting it, that much support and that much belief. I, for a while, had pivoted to going, I'm going to just stay with enterprise. I'm going to be a general manager one day. That's the route I'm going to go. I had so many amazing mentors. And then, I met my former husband, and he was a regional rental manager out of Memphis. So I had to make the tough decision and decided love over that career, and then ended up going back to the pharmaceutical sales route.
I've interviewed, over 200 people, and people make decisions based, I go, well, you were on the top of your game at Cisco. There was a heyday of Cisco, and you're a senior vice president. Like, why'd you leave? Well, I was traveling, 65%. My kids were young. I didn't, so a lot. I mean, I credit you for that. What was the big disappointment? It's at Bristol Myers Squibb. I mean, in terms of pharma's tough. In terms of you're competing, and there's 6 or 7 Bristol Myers Squibb's sales reps representing different products would see the same doctor, right? But talk about that experience, and not that it soured you on the role, but just talk about it.
Well, it was interesting. It was an amazing place it was a great experience to learn about marketing from a different perspective and learning about sales. So their sales program and their training was next level. It is part of seeing behind the curtain though, because in the medical industry and just kind of the way that we're raised, it's almost, kind of believing in the industry as godlike. You just trust without questioning. You just believe that they're always for your best interest. And through the training, there were a lot of tricks of how to cherry pick from a study and what's the subconscious repetition to get into a doctor's brain and, 10 times, 15 seconds, this piece of marketing material. And we're going to do it very strategically between pharmaceutical reps where they do this message this week and this message this week. So it's so strategic and so specific on how to get into the subconscious of the provider in order to write prescriptions, in order for our profits to go up. And yes, it was to align with a certain patient group. And there were a couple of medications I promoted where the goal was for everybody to use it, not really just based on who is meant for. So I really got to learn how to cherry pick studies, and I had to learn how to look at studies, how to compare it to the competitors, how to identify key elements. And so that was incredibly valuable. And I will say it took off the rose-colored glasses when it came to just blindly trusting the medical industry, because I could see in real time. I had some really great doctors I talked to, and then I had some that were, what can you do for me? And I'll write prescriptions to help you if I like you, Right. So it was a popularity contest in some cases also. So again, that just really kind of ripped the curtain off of my eyes. So that soured it. And then also coming from enterprise and just how celebrated and how fantastic their program was through their people and how supported I really genuinely felt, all the way from the regional vice president, who is, you look at what they're in charge of and who, what their position is, the fact that I felt that as a management trainee all the way through from that position. I didn't realize how special that was coming straight out of college and not having experienced anything else. But coming from that to a normal company, it felt like a shock to my system because I did not receive any of that kind of support the way that I did with enterprise. And so that in combination with peeling behind the curtain and then realizing quickly I was a 24-year-old girl, how much value could I genuinely offer a doctor that's been doing this for 40 years and really knew what he was doing. I was like, I don't know if this is the match for the value my soul wants to provide. So
you exit Bristol Myers Squibb and basically make a decision to, looks like, do the most important job, stay at home with your kids. Based on some research, like you homeschooled your children too. Talk about that period of time and what it meant to you and what you learned.
Well, it was such an interesting shift because I grew up with my mom again, going into the chief operating officer road of life. And I remember as a child trying on her high heels and pantyhose, looking in the mirror going, I'm going to be my mom one day. And in my early 20s, I had girlfriends that their only goal was to become a wife. Literally 5 days before I started dating my then husband, I had made the decision at age 23 that I was probably going to be single and that it was very likely I was going to meet a husband and that I wanted to always be a mom. So I had made the decision at 23 that I was going to have my own kids at age 30 if it just never seemed to happen. But my plan was the career route. And like that was what I thought my life was going to be. And then when I met my former husband, he's 8 years older than me. And I had always dreamed of your more traditional family where the mom stays home. And I talked about it with my mom one day and I was like, I never considered that path. Like that's not ever something I wanted to do. What do you think about that? And she said to me, she was like, the big difference is like, if it's a choice that you are able to do and it's something you can try, she was like, honestly, that's something I've never experienced. Maybe you should try it. It's okay to try it. And so she gave me the green light. It changed my perspective of like, wow, okay, maybe I will try this. So I did, and it was such a great experience. It's funny, having that much energy in one person. I will say that I dabbled a little bit with like, I needed to still be busy. After the kids were always on great routines and they slept through the night by 12 weeks of age. And I mean, we had spreadsheets in the house. I took that type A and brought it into the house. And so we always had nice meals and it was a lot of fun. I wanted to always do something also on top of that. I had to have an outlet for all the energy that I had inside of me. So we had 5 children and I did triathlons for a number of years. My former husband was very supportive of that. So my goal was to do an Ironman before the age of 35. Getting pregnant with our 4th child deterred that one. Yeah, it was fun. I was on a racing team in Memphis and I would go on 80-mile bike rides on Saturdays. And it just was so much fun. I loved that period of time. And then a friend of mine in Memphis, she homeschooled her children. She did classical conversations and we met at a park when I was pregnant with my 2nd child and she was as well. So our children were the same ages and she really educated me on everything. And so she shared with me like her experience with it, what she's learning about it and her choice to start homeschooling at age 5. And when we moved to North Carolina, we found this great little private school and that was great we were going to have the kids just go through that in Hickory. And then we moved to Greensboro and I couldn't quite find the same type of private school that I loved in Hickory. And then at that time, the curriculum was really changing and I was just concerned with some of the things they were teaching in the schools and especially how young the kids were. I really didn't want them to be confused with just their identity in general. And that was a really huge push at that time. This was back, Ava was 7 at the time. She's 19. So 12 years ago, there was just this huge push on the curriculum and I wasn't in alignment with that. So I contacted my friend Tracy and she went through all of her philosophies and I said, okay, this is going to be my job. My job is homeschooling the children and I'm going to learn everything I can learn about it and that this is what I'm going to do. So that was our journey. I learned I interviewed teachers. I sat in on homeschooling co-ops. I went to conventions. I interviewed homeschooling moms. I looked through every curriculum. I learned about different learning styles and the way the brain works, and different personality styles and just how the different fits work. And I'd say the hardest challenge was breaking out of the mold of what I felt like it should be based off the conditioning of all I experienced in public school. And once I finally broke free from it has to be like this, that's when we just eclipsed into a really great experience with homeschooling. But it was great. I designed a completely different grading system and actually put it all together in a really great way. At the time, I wanted to present it to other groups so that they could adopt it as well. But I wasn't a fan. It didn't make sense to me, our current grading system, because I feel like our current grading system actually trains children to be afraid of failure. So you get an A or a B, you pass or fail, and you're good or bad based on that. So I thought, well, the whole purpose of education is to develop you into a human being. And part of that is you have to fail. Like that's how you actually learn. So you can't be afraid of failing if that's actually the process to becoming the best version of you. So I designed a completely different grading system where it was based off of effort and not based off of accuracy. So with that one, I would give the kids, this is your expectations, and you have a choice to either exceed expectations through effort, to meet those expectations, or not do them at all. And so the failure was if they didn't even try. They would have a meet expectations or exceed. And then actually the content, I did it off of mastery. So they would have to master the content in the curriculum before we'd move on to the next lesson. They'd have to do 90% or greater. So their grades were based off of effort, but they didn't move forward until they actually mastered the content at 90%. So there was no backlash or stigma for failing. It's like, oh, this is just part of the process. That's what it is. I had a very specific system with multiple children. We read on the couch. I had one child doing self-study, so they would teach themselves so they learned how to critically think and how to work through things where someone's not just spoon feeding you, material. And then we would do projects. So group projects. One year I had the kids decide what are they passionate about. And we would do an entire unit based on that. And the end of it would be just my child and me, the child and me would do a field trip. So my oldest did cooking, my second child did marine biology, and then my third did airplanes. And so I remember my second child, we went to Atlanta and spent the whole weekend together, just him and me, went to the aquarium. And so I had all the math unit based on that and projects and science. So it was honestly my favorite time of life. It was really an amazing experience to have that with my kids. And as more babies were being born, just bringing them into the mix and nursing them or napping with, they got to learn what life looked like. It was fun.
You must have been great too, because you're based on your fitness and all that, triathlons and all that good stuff. The PE classes, the gym classes for homeschooling had to be great with you as the.
It was fun. We got the little kids triathlons. I did after the fourth child was born. We sold my bike because I did know of a few people that had accidents and were dying. And so we want to make sure I'm alive for the kids.
Yeah, it's good choice. I know you and your husband at the time decided to go into a franchise and started the process in May of 2019 and then opened about 6 weeks before COVID. So let's talk about that journey for you.
Yeah. So in 2019, actually on my daughter's birthday, we got the news that my former husband's career had expired. So he came home and said, it's done. So 23 years with one company. He had started with them right after college as well. It was part of the identity. It was part of our identity together. He made it to regional vice president over North Carolina, oversaw 53 offices. So he did very well. And that was our life. So during that time, it was tough, if you can imagine, just the identity shift and trying to get through it. It was really hard. And so we decided we wanted to be near family, and corporate America just didn't have the same taste that it did before. So a couple of other buddies that started with enterprise and made it to the level he did went the franchise route, and it went really well for them. They had just different pizza franchises. It seems to be a popular theme with former officers of the company. They go the franchise route. So we decided to look into it. I had actually eaten at another broken egg in North Carolina. So I'd taken the kids, at that time we did a little stint of private school in Raleigh-Durham. So I drove that distance. I was no afraid of doing the hard road. That's going to be the theme you see. I drove an hour and 40 minutes for my daughter's music lessons because it was the best piano teacher, and she competed and did 2 hours of piano practice every day. She was phenomenal with it. But I was never afraid of the hard road. And so drove an hour and 15 minutes to this little school we did. And I would try out little breakfast restaurants. And I came across another broken egg. And I just had it in my back pocket. I'd heard of them. At the time I was kind of exploring, if we were ever to own our own business one day, what would it look like? So I was playing with different business plans and exploring different things at the time. And it coincided with when, he lost his job. So the plan originally was to just sit for 6 months and rest. But understandably, my husband was the sole provider of 5 children and me and, had been for 14 years. So a lot of fear comes on board, and it's really hard to just sit still knowing your responsibilities. So we decided to just have a solution a lot faster than that. And we decided to go the franchise route and did due diligence with another broken egg. To us, everything made sense, and we decided to do it. And we wanted to be near family. I have a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins here in Kansas, so we decided to come to Kansas. I will say I had a very bad feeling. About Kansas. And so I asked him multiple times. I was like, please, let's not move to Kansas. But the decision had been made. So I accepted it. And we moved here, decided to build a house. 6 weeks before COVID, finally opened the restaurant. It was actually doing really well. It was starting to just all come together at that 6-week mark. And then COVID hit. And I remember the day before we shut down, 2 days before we shut down, the servers came up to me. Other places were shutting down on their own. This is before it was mandated by the county and definitely before it was mandated by the state. And a couple of servers came to me and said, hey, Britney, what's going to happen? Are you shutting down? And I said, listen, if we shut down, it's because the government forces us to shut down. And that's going to be a whole different can of worms. It'll be one thing if people don't come in. Of course, there's, the pandemic. But no, why would we ever shut down? That's not America. Of course we'll be open. Your job is safe. And then a few days later, we get the news from Johnson County, shut down. So I was like, hey, server, remember when I told you we're not shutting down? And the worst case scenario would be another can of worms to look at. And today's that day. So that happened. I knew in my gut it wasn't going to be 2 weeks. Remember, they said at the time, it's just 2 weeks.
Right, 2 weeks.
It's just 2 weeks. And I knew in my soul, there was one night, I called one of our chief marketing officer at the franchisor, and I was like, what do we do? Like, I don't know. I know this isn't 2 weeks. And she was like, drink champagne. I don't know what else to tell you. And so there was one night I did have a little too much to drink, and I just felt it in my soul. And I was like, oh my God, I could feel it. I knew what was coming. I could feel it.
Yeah.
Then the state shut us down. And at that point, my husband and I were working it together. I became more of the face in the front of house, and he did a lot of the back end of stuff with the restaurant. Especially during that time, my passion was the creative part, the marketing and connecting with the guests and connecting with the team. And so I was there frequently because of that. And all I could see was like, we're going to lose everything if we don't do something. Like, this is breakfast. It's not, carry out for scrambled eggs. How disgusting is that? Like, how far can we really go with this?
Right.
I tried to figure it out. And then the solution was, we talked about, there was one point in the summer. So we were going to possibly move to Texas. And because I had gotten a job as a director of development 2 weeks before COVID hit, which is what saved us. Such a miracle. God is amazing. I had a friend of mine I did a project with in 2017 and 18. And she and I were talking, and she said they have this role they need. And I said, I'm interested. And through a couple of interviews, they hired me as their director of development for fundraising 2 weeks before COVID hit. So my salary is what brought us through when everything dropped, before we got PPP, any of it. So I had that going, and I thought, okay, do we just and kind of a backstory, my former husband and I, we actually separated in March of 2020. That 1 week when we shut down for the restaurant, it was our house closed and we moved into a brand new house. We decided to separate. I asked for a divorce, and then COVID shut us down. So that was a very that was a week. So that summer we tried to reconcile and do counseling.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. For us, the virus was like the last thing. Like, that was like maybe like the 10th priority in our lives, because there was a lot more going on.
COVID stressed everybody out. I mean, we had never seen anything like it, and no one in the world. You're separating, you're thinking of a divorce, you're buying a new, like the stress level, whatever the point factors are, moving's one of the highest, death of a loved one, new job, how did you handle the stress at the time? And if you go back, looking at it now, would you do anything different to manage your stress?
Manage the stress. It's funny. I think I was trained as a child from moving so much, how to handle stress and how to be resilient. And so I depended on that foundation. And it's the same way I handle stress today. I've always handled it the same way. And honestly, on that part of it, I'm very proud of how I handled stress. That's one part of the gift of what God gave me from moving a lot as a child. I'm incredibly grateful for, is that resiliency. The way that my brain is wired is find the solution. And even if the solution is not anyone else's solution, it's going to be my solution. And if it makes sense, then let's do it. And so I don't really bask in feeling like a victim for very long at all. Like it might hit for a second and then I'm like, okay, solve it. Let's go to solving it. So there's really not a whole lot of emotion other than processing the initial shock. And then after that shock is processed, I go straight to how do we fix it? So, and if other people in my world are just not at that point yet, I like to just fill in the blanks. I mean, somebody has to. So like, I'll just jump in the driver's seat and I'll fix it. That's what happened with COVID. And I agree. COVID, I don't think it created the cracks. I think it brought the cracks to the surface for a lot of relationships. And for us, it was like 2012. We almost got a divorce then and we went to counseling and we decided not to. So this wasn't something that was just created by COVID and it wasn't something that was overnight. We were married for 15 years. So it definitely was a number of things that it was the small cuts that eventually erode a foundation. And something big like a job loss, move across the country, and COVID, opening a restaurant, like all those things is gonna bring it all to the surface a lot faster. In the summer, we tried to reconcile, and we thought we were. I even proposed to him on 4th of July because he had proposed to me on 4th of July, and we were going to renew our vows. Then we were going to move to Texas and have a fresh start, keep the restaurant, and just have our manager run it and do it remotely. And I'm a big fan of if things are meant to be, it happens that way. And if it's not, it doesn't happen. And so we had a contract on a 10-acre property right outside of in Wimberley, Texas, right outside of Austin. We had interest in buying our house from one of the vendors that actually provided the kitchen cabinets the countertops for our kitchen. And we had an offer on our business. Like we had all three within 1 week. We went back to negotiate all three. And when we went back to negotiate all three of them fell apart within 2 days.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts. He creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
We had a contract on a 10-acre property right outside of in Wimberley, Texas, right outside of Austin. We had interest in buying our house from one of the vendors that actually provided the kitchen cabinets the countertops for our kitchen. And we had an offer on our business. Like we had all three within 1 week. We went back to negotiate all three. And when we went back to negotiate all three of them fell apart within 2 days.
Wow.
Okay, so we're not meant to do that. Let's see what else we're meant to do. And at that point, this was August of 20, needed to have a solution for the kids with school. We're really fighting life at this point. And so I decided back when I homeschooled them, I had a model in my head of if I ever wanted to start a school, this is what it would look like. So that seed was planted 5 years earlier. And so my solution was, let's open a school. Why not? So we opened a school within 6 weeks from start to finish. I had secured 40 students. We had 23 families. We had 10 teachers hired, and we rented a 10-acre property in Kansas that was on a farmland. And I created the curriculum. It was all in my head, so I just got it knocked out. And so we had the curriculum ready to go. To keep the tuition affordable, we opened a nonprofit. So I got that secured, a 501c3. And I had businesses come in. And so the dues from the businesses, this is how the three entities worked. The families were required to cater lunch from our restaurant. So that supported the restaurant every single day. And then the nonprofits, their dues and fees went to serve the school so we could keep the tuition low for the families. And then we would have meetings at the restaurant frequently for the businesses. And we would all support the businesses and we would do fundraising events. And I did a speech in September of 2020 in front of about 1,000 people, was online, a lot of views, and about how to navigate as a business owner COVID. And I talked about the school and I talked about our restaurant. And I was also the director for this nonprofit still. And it garnered quite a bit of support. And I didn't realize how much support we received until life got back to normal. But I remember the last few months of my second restaurant, I had a customer come in and sit at the bar and she said, Brittany, I've been coming to your restaurants for 4 years now. And it's because of that speech you did in 2020. And I just want to support you. And we had people driving 2 hours one way to support us, 3 hours one way. It was just a really unbelievable time. Life happened. Things weren't handled the right way. Some things came to the surface that I discovered in October of 2020. And so November, I filed for divorce. November 11th, and 6 weeks later, it was final. We were originally supposed to own the restaurant together and do like a nesting house. In January of 21, we were like, that's not a good idea. Like 6 weeks for a divorce is unheard of after 15 years.
Right. Yeah.
That's how fast it happened. So we decided together, looking back on it is what it is. But I had on my resume a 14-year gap. And so for me to get an actual W-2 job, I'm competing with 20-something-year-olds, and this was 2021. Jobs were really hard to come by. My ex-husband had a beautiful career. So we're like, well, what makes sense? And I have this strength and this belief that I can do anything, good and bad sometimes. But we decided I was going to buy him out of the restaurant and take on all the liability and take on all of the upside and the downside. And I was going to learn how to be a business owner really fast. And so that's what we did. He got a beautiful job that supports the family and supported the kids. And it went really well. You know, I implemented a program that we'll talk about in a second, but the Triggers program, and I implemented an employee development program that was based off of my training with Enterprise, with my pharmaceutical days. And at the time, we were ranking 68 out of 75 locations out of the country. And within 6 weeks, we jumped to number one over 5 different categories, over one of those categories. And the impressive part is that we ranked consistently every single week within those 5 categories between 1 and 5 every week, as long as I had my attention set on this. What I did is I treated the servers and the bartenders like salespeople and like respected, educated adults. And so we had an MVP program. We did a matrix. We had contests every day. Just the energy we brought to it. I did a couple of trainings on the nervous system and how to, look at different things, different ways. We had servers that would come to me and say, my tip percentage was 18%. And then after this training, it's now 30%. I handled this table completely differently. We had franchisees from like Nashville and places going, how are you selling so much alcohol, which is your highest profit margin? We were a breakfast place that turned into a bar. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun.
Get those morning drinkers,
Oh my God. Well, and we did. We would have, the best part, when we could sell alcohol to go, we had these little pouches that we wore around our necks like it was a party. And we would greet our tables with, do you want a margarita to go? And so it became, we had sales training, we did role playing, we had morning meetings. It was so much fun and I loved it. I was required to open 4 locations. So there's that journey. By the summer of 22, I signed the lease for our second location, but life started getting back to normal. And at that point, so the school had dissolved in January of 21. Okay. You can't go through that much stress and not have a consequence. And by December of 2020, I did go to the cardiologist and he was like, Brittany, you are out of cortisol. You have AFib, like your heart is about to give out. Like you've got to put down the plates. So that's what I did. I resigned from my director job in March of 21 because I needed to, for my heart, it was about to give out. So I had to put that down and only focused on the business. There were a couple of factors that resulted in the school dissolving, which, won't get into, but like it definitely, it was a meant to be thing. It was an out of nowhere situation that dissolved the school, which then the need for the nonprofit dissolved as well because life started to get back to normal. So we just had all that. So by the summer, I signed this lease for the second location, and then life got back to normal and numbers started plummeting. And I started covering payroll with my savings account. And so I called the franchisor and I was like, hey, white flag, I need out. This isn't going to work. And due to the contract and everything else, the advice given at the time was go ahead and open a second location, grow both of them, sell them as a group, do it after like 6 months. You're going to be fine. That's the solution. And I heard, gosh, who said this? I can't remember who said this, but he did an interview with a lot of people who failed in entrepreneurship and then came back and made it. And they said that the number one thing the people that came back and made it said is that the one thing they learned is to listen to themselves more than any other person. Like, don't listen to other people. They don't worry about what people think. And I'll say that now, that's what I learned too. But at the time, it made sense. It was on paper. So I sold my house in Kansas to cover the restaurants and to survive off of while opening the second location, and bought a house in Missouri. And we all had the belief that the second location was going to be the Phoenix Rising because the numbers really started struggling. That will save the day. It'll be good. And we opened May of 23, the second location. Well, life really got back to normal in Kansas City, and especially in Prairie Village. And in that area, everyone traveled and went to Europe, and like everything just opened up. So numbers were 40% below projections. It was the perfect storm. We were required to change over our point of sale system. And so we had changed that over. The technology screwed a ton of stuff up. We had high turnover. The brand new of any restaurant, the first few months are just a mess until it like evens out. But it was just the perfect storm. Anything that could go wrong did. And by August, I ran out of money. It was done. And so my manager tripped and fell in August of 23 at my first location, Overland Park. She couldn't work for a while. And I was like, well, I ran out of money. I can't keep floating payroll. And now I don't have a manager. There's only one of me. So I made the decision to shut down my first location, thinking that my second could bring it up. And I went to the franchisor and the summit and the chairman of the board, because it was bought out by private equity out of New York. And I was like, I really need you guys to help me, buy me out. And that was an education on just the franchise model, and not specific another broken egg, but the franchise model in general. I started learning and was warned by other franchisees when I tried to sell everything out to them. They told me at that time, they said, we want to support you, but why would we? We're waiting for you to fall, because then we get it a lot cheaper than what we would pay you out for. So he's like, we care about you as a human being, but on paper, like, no one's going to help you. So I started getting those warnings. And then in October of 23, they tried to find me in default, and they couldn't. The legal bills were going through the roof. They'd say one thing, then go back another. My attorney was like, there's something fishy about this. It doesn't feel quite right. And I was like, no, they're good people. They said they were going to help me. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. I believe them. And so my biggest fear was filing bankruptcy. My biggest fear was failure. My biggest fear was what's going to happen. Like, what's going to happen to my reputation? Who's going to want to work with me if they see I failed? Like, I'd been a high achiever my whole life. So if that failed, that was my biggest fear at that time. My landlord, actually, for the Prairie Village location, they were amazing and gave me some little nuggets, some perspectives of entrepreneurship that I hadn't considered before. And, just the idea and the concept that actually it depends on what you do with the failure that matters. And you can go one of two roads. And if you go the road that other people are watching, then that actually says a lot more about you, and people want to do business with you. And I had never considered that before. And that one nugget that I was told from them, it got me through the next few years. Like, it really did. Yeah. November of 23, I'd had a plan in place with 10 of my vendors. I said, if I make money, you make money. Let's figure this out. Let's have a marketing campaign, and I'm going to push through. We're not going to fail. We're going to do this. I had everyone on board. And then 2 days later, again, that hand of God, sometimes it just happens. I get a call from my manager at the time, and she said, Britney, there are bugs coming out of the tables, like out of the inside of the tables, like apocalyptic. And I was like, what on earth are you talking about? What the fuck is this? And so What?
Oh,
And so I called pest control and they come out. And what we discovered is that the tables from the manufacturer, they had not been killed hot enough. And so the larvae from powder post beetles got stuck inside of the wood and they weren't killed. So now they were finishing their life cycle and they were literally burrowing out of the tables 2 days after I had a plan on how we were going to like save the restaurant. And I was like, I mean, white flag? Oh my gosh, what do I do with this? The cash flow dance had been happening for months at this point. Like I was on a string, like staying open. So I called the franchisor and I was like, help me, help. I don't know what to do. And basically the response I got back was, are you closed yet? Are you closed? And I was like, well, not yet. I got to make payroll next week. So I stayed open. That was on a Friday. I stayed open till Sunday, just praying that a bug didn't come out in someone's omelet. That Sunday afternoon, you can't tell your staff ahead of time because they won't show up. And then they won't be able to make payroll because nobody's there to serve the guests.
right.
So I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. And December 3rd, I went in and I told my staff, I'm like, I have no choice. We have to shut down. And so I shut down the second location. 11 hours later, I received my first legal notice from the franchisor. They waited 11 hours to come after you. So their business model is this. They receive a revenue, and this is most franchises. This is not independent to another broken egg. This is just how it works. So they get a revenue stream when you sign on and you get the fee. They get a revenue stream on the royalties from your gross revenues. They get a revenue stream on the kickbacks on the things that, they're suggested to use, different vendors. So they have a revenue stream on that. They have a revenue stream on if you fail, if you're in default, they get to take your investment free of charge. They have a revenue stream on if they decide to sell that investment for pennies on the dollar to another franchisee and then have them come on board for more locations. And then they have a revenue stream based on the contracts that they can create or find ways to sue you for the rest of your life. So those are the revenue streams. So the franchisor model is going to be successful whether you are or not. And it's not on for your net profits. So I would recommend anyone going into the franchise business, ask what the revenue stream is on net profits, because then they have a vested interest in you being successful. But if they don't, they're going to succeed whether you succeed or fail. So for me, I was very grateful because another Broken Eggs contract was based out of Florida, which is very business friendly. Had it not been based out of Florida, I could have really been screwed. So December 20th, 2023, I filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy to protect my children, to protect me. And as 5 days before Christmas. And so my parents stepped up. They gave me a loan to pay back so I could afford Christmas gifts that year. And I got the tree a couple of days beforehand. We celebrated. I did the best I could to protect them from all of this, and anything they saw come through, they saw it as this is how you handle life when it hands you a shit sandwich. You're going to eat it up. We're not going to dwell on it. And so I just really tried to have that as my perspective. Moving to Missouri, they have different bankruptcy laws than Kansas does. And so that didn't work out well either. Just a really great lesson. I lost my house. I had to surrender my car. It was amazing. So my parents jumped up and they bought a house in Kansas that we're renting from them. And they provided a car. I got a W-2 roll and I just kind of rested for a while to heal and recover. The bankruptcy took a lot longer than normal. There were some other pieces to it. It was interesting. So it finally got discharged in August of 24. My case was closed actually last week, which was really exciting to get that news. So everything, like that chapter is over. That was a huge experience. The employee development plan I put together in Triggers in 2021, I planned to market that and take it to other restaurant owners at that time. But then, of course, life gave you a shit sandwich. So I just had to put that on a shelf for a while and hold on to it. And so I just worked through those same tools for my own healing and processing and a lot of emotional processing and a lot of nervous system regulation. Yeah, so life just kind of continued from there. And there's a few more other fun, really stories that go along with it. But I feel like I'm talking a lot. So you go ahead with the next question.
It's all good. Yeah, I know. I mean, I'd be talking about you can't make this shit up. I mean, I don't know how you told the story during the time it was happening, but I mean, you almost talk about it matter of factly now, which is a credit to you. and your resilience and your mindset. But I'm so interested on the triggers ending with a Z program, and how, you were 68th out of 75 franchises in the Another Broken Egg system. You went to the top 1 through 5 for 18 consecutive weeks. It looked like you were months, I'm sorry. It looked like you were hiring people in recovery as part of that. And so I know, based on all this, you started Shaw Enterprises for the for-profit side and Empower You, but I'm just, and I know, based on your website, I'm familiar with Viktor Frankl and Byron Katie and the Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz. So it's fascinating to me how you really deep dived into this, the transformational program of spirit, mind, body. So talk about Shaw and Empower You and what you're doing now.
I always do things a little differently. So as a child, I've always had a really strong relationship with God and had a very spiritual relationship. Went to church maybe a handful of times, and that's it, as a child. And then in 2014, we discovered a good church. And I had, after my fourth child, had a little bit of some postpartum and really wanted to get through it. And so my best friend, she was like, have you heard of Byron Katie? Like, you need to look into her books. And so right before my fourth child turned 1, so that was 2015, I had just dove into Byron Katie, and it changed my world. It changed everything. And I was like, holy cow, this is amazing. My perspective started changing, my life started changing, everything. So I started being really consistent with that practice in 2015. In 2021, it just hijacked another level after the divorce to get back to creating the program. I had said a little prayer, because at that time, my heart, by the time the divorce was final, my heart had turned into stone, literal stone. And one of my favorite gifts was that I could feel a lot. I could feel a lot of good. I could feel a lot of bad. I could feel everything. So I asked a little prayer that I could feel again, and that I could be healed to the version that could have been strong enough in the marriage where I could have healed my husband and through all the struggles we went through, and I didn't have to leave. And I could, I wasn't dependent on external validation for my own happiness. Heal me to that version so I could be of service instead of needing somebody else to give me that happiness and joy. And so I said those two prayers, which I'm so grateful for. And God healed it. And so it was one of those, there's somatic learning and there's cognitive learning. So you can learn from a book, the Four Agreements, you can learn from that and know about it philosophically. And then when the experiences come in life to test it, then you're like, oh, now I know how to do this because I know it logically. For me, it was backwards. So I learned through my heart, and I would pray a lot, give me clarity. And I just received this clarity, these visuals, these dreams. It would come to me out of nowhere in the shower while I'm driving, this aha moment. I had it over and over and over again. And I'm very pattern recognition is just something I've always been able to do. And I have a partial photographic memory. So it's between those two, just the way my brain is made, I put a lot of stuff together and start putting the sequences together in different ways. So that's how it came to be. And then again, in COVID, hiring from Indeed or your typical platforms in the service industry was impossible. If you remember, getting good, staffing, restaurants struggled.
Yeah.
And we didn't. The reason why is because we had employed a couple of team members that were from this group called Crossroads, which was this recovery group with that came from more affluent families, from teens to 20-year-olds. And we loved them. The mindset, the healing program, it was a lot of different things in alignment with what I was doing with Triggers too. But, taking accountability for their lives. They wanted to try something different. They just had a light in their eyes. So we used that as our feeder for employing our team. And we had at one point 20, 30 folks from that group. And we provided that safe space for their recovery. And it was phenomenal. My greatest compliment that we ever received in the restaurant is when a customer would come in and say, it just feels different here. And that's why they would come. And it was because of the service that our team gave. It's because of just the fun that we had on a daily basis. And so that's how that employment came to be. Triggers came to be from that direction. So in 2024, this is where the miracles started happening. There was a huge moment, I'd say late May, early June of 24, after my first W-2 role, after the restaurants ended. And it was one of those like coming to God moments. I had a huge, like, I fasted for a week. I meditated for a week. It was one of those like really deeply spiritual healing moments that took a couple of weeks to integrate. And after that moment, it felt like life completely reset and recalibrated from the shoe dropping constantly and something always going wrong to life was finally getting back to normal and it was going to be okay again. So that October, I was flying to Phoenix for a conference. And I was working with a W-2 employer at that time, a marketing agency out of Washington, D.C. in a remote role. And survival mode. Like it was not providing, but I got through it. I was bartending on the side to try to make ends meet, doing whatever I could to pay for groceries. And so I was on this airplane and sitting behind me was this gentleman. Kansas City is so small and so amazing in so many ways. The story goes, he wanted to do this initiative for this general contractor out of Phoenix and asked a couple of attorneys in Kansas City who would be good for this role. He was an advisor for this company, a consultant. And my name came up. They were like, she's never done construction, but you really got to check out Britney. Like, she'd be great. So he looked me up on LinkedIn in July of 24 and found my profile and didn't do anything with it, put it in his back pocket. So that October of 24, he's sitting behind me on the airplane and he recognized me from LinkedIn and tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I might have an opportunity for you. Do you want to talk about this job opportunity? And I was like, absolutely, let's do it. And so we talked for 45 minutes. We had 8 interviews. The final interview is my favorite story, is on December 3rd, 2024, 1 year to the day I shut down my restaurant. I'm flying to Phoenix to have my final interview with the CEO. And within a week, I get my job offer 40% greater than what I was making in the marketing agency. And I could finally get out of survival mode in that moment. It was fantastic. So January of 25, I started that role, director of partnerships over national accounts. So I get to travel, make friends is my job. So I work with developers and engineers and architects across the country on building infrastructure for their projects. I love it. I love it. It's such a great role. And that company is amazing. So with getting that role, my passion was still like mentorship and just working with people. And so I stayed in touch with my former bartender that was one of the feeders for that program from Crossroads that I had with the restaurant. And his dream was to own his own nonprofit, his sober house. So we started meeting on a weekly basis so that, a source of inspiration. I wanted to try to get him to his dream, to his goal, and business plan making, just anything to keep him on his target. And then that July, I came across a grant, a grant was shared with us to look into from one of his family friends that's more tied politically. So I looked into the grant for him and I noticed that the grant would also work for me with the Triggers program and that I had an LLC that was dormant. I was like, I'm going to apply for the grant for him to help him out. And for the heck of it, I'm going to apply for a grant for me too and see what happens. I received the grant. And unfortunately for his dynamic, it wasn't a good fit for the grant people, but for me it was. So we received an $81,000 grant from the state of Kansas, and it's to serve kids and youth between the ages of 12 and 18 to prevent addictions is the idea with alcohol and marijuana. Our program is focused on nervous system regulation and emotional processing. So what started as just a grant to try to help out, I was then thrown into, I better formalize this entire curriculum and the updates I've made to it over the last 5 years and make it, and I had to do it fast. And so I'm putting together all the materials and then I'm talking to some friends and I had a girlfriend, she hired me to be a consultant, Corey actually. So she hired me on to help her with her business and just kind of clarify some things. Then I had another client come on board. So I'm working with 2 clients and I'm like, well, maybe this LLC needs to be developed. So it's one of those, it just happened. It just one thing after another, it turned into a transformation consulting firm. And the grant was awarded in December of 25. I'm excited to announce that starting next week, I'm partnered with the Wyandotte County Juvenile Detention Center, and I'll be working there every Thursday with their residents one-on-one, and we're collecting data so we can see how that goes. So I'm very excited about that. But yeah, that's where the Shaw Enterprises came from and was birthed. And so then it was like, well, I can do this as a corporate wellness vertical because I had developed a corporate wellness vertical for the first W-2 role outside of my restaurants that I did. And that went really well. So I can do a corporate wellness vertical with that. And then I can work with other nonprofits. I partnered with Michael Delaney with Thymic Carcinoma Center. Funny story. So we opened up our restaurant in January of 2020. Shadow Buddies was our nonprofit that we promoted for our soft opening, and Mike was on their board. And so he was one of my customers for all those years. And he reached out to me like at the end, he was like, what's going on? I haven't heard from you in a while, like the restaurants, what's going on? So we connected and I shared with him about the grant. And so now we're partnered where I'm serving his client base through the TRIGGERZ program and collaborating on potentially grant acquisitions. We're collecting data. I have 2 clients from him now with that. So that's where that started. And then I have a big vision where it's like 5 years down the road, 3 in 1. And then how can I do it all efficiently where capacity is not an issue? And so my dream was to do a nonprofit later down the road. And then I saw there was like an issue or a problem with, fundraising. And I was like, well, I better do this now. And so in March of 26, I went ahead and launched the nonprofit. I have an amazing board. I'm so grateful for my board. They're phenomenal in every way. We have our first board meeting actually this afternoon. Received the official 501c3 exemption status from the IRS like a couple weeks ago. It feels like 6 months ago, but not long ago, got that exemption stamped. We're putting together a fundraising platform for corporate sponsorship. So the main difference is this. So Shaw Enterprises is services rendered. So we are serving 3 sectors to help affect a whole continuum, ending and serving productivity for companies. We move the needle for productivity, net profits, those metrics, but it's based on the inside out. So nervous system regulation, emotional processing. And it starts with the continuum of, youth. It starts with digital screens and numbing out to addictions, to violence, to incarceration, relationships, and it goes into the workforce. So we serve, individuals, groups, the workforce, and nonprofits on a services rendered. The nonprofit side is we are serving youth primarily and adults in crisis through funding sources. So with that, we're doing grant acquisitions, we're doing sponsorships, and we're doing fundraising. The idea is we're giving the services out, and a percentage of the revenues from Shaw is going towards Empower You in order to fund that as well. So that's where we're starting with it. And actually what I'm doing is I'm taking TRIGGERZ and I'm going to be, it's on my to-do list for this weekend. So I'm going to actually acquire a third LLC and I'm going to just keep that separate and then just kind of have it all under one umbrella. That way I can develop that as a product. My goal is to make that into a self-paced curriculum and that program. So then we can scale it, and capacity wise, these plates don't fall down and we don't go back into AFib status. So that's the goal.
Britney, I'm exhausted just admiring all the stuff you're doing. So I think it's phenomenal. I mean, we could talk, so much longer. I have so many questions. I would like to ask, I always like to help 2 groups of people. One's that recent college or even high school graduate now that's going to start their professional career. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your 22-ish year old self after you got out of the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga about getting a job and starting a professional career?
Yeah, I'd say, hang on to that core motivation you had since a child, the thing that drove you as a child, which is helping people. And it doesn't matter what role you're in, you can still be in fulfillment for that core purpose in every role, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or a salesperson or working for a pharmaceutical company or starting your own business. That role, so that it doesn't have a separation of work and home. You're just in your purpose and every day feels like fun.
Yeah, I love that. The second group is, while everybody can be a leader at a company, those that choose the path of actually leading a group of team members on an org chart, and they become that first-time manager, what advice do you have for them?
Regardless of your pay structure and regardless of the structure within your company, you're only a successful leader based off of the best you can bring out of your people. And what that means is, do you believe in your people? Are you taking ownership over their success? And the more successful your people are, the more successful you are, regardless of any other structure that's in place. Your highest priority is, how do you create the conditions for your people to succeed naturally, and understand and recognize where maybe some micromanagement activities or your own nervousness and your own insecurities are actually impacting your people out of a survival mode, and you're not going to get results from that. So make sure you have your side of the street clean first, where you can provide the conditions where you trust your people and you believe in them, and have those hard conversations, but allow them the room to really be themselves, and then match them to where they really need to be. Notice what they're good at. Notice where their talents are. Sometimes people don't know what they're good at. They don't know where they're best suited, but you can see it in them because you're a leader. So as a leader, go, I don't know if you're in the right role. Have you thought about this? And what if we try this out? I feel like you could really flourish on what your purpose is if you're in this role. So I'd say, if you take on the mindset that your job is to create a successful team based off of what they produce, and your only job is creating those conditions so that they can succeed, you'll be in pretty good shape.
Brittany, thanks so much for coming on the Corporate Couch. I'm so excited to see where you take this, because you're phenomenal. I think you're going to do so many great things that I know you already have, but I think you're really going to take it to the next level. So thank you for coming on the Corporate Couch.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
There's so many things I could say about Brittany. First of all, so many areas through our whole life. Like, what 17-year-old develops a 7-year plan to say, I'm going to work for a pharma company in sales?
Yeah.
She gets her pharmacy tech certification, works for a pharmacy in high school, then says, okay, then I'm going to go to college. I need a marketing degree. And then I need sales experience. And then I'm going to become a pharma rep. She does all of it. I mean, like, to the letter.
Mm-hmm.
Worked for Enterprise out of college, 7, months in a row, top salesperson in the region, becomes a pharma rep. And after, I think, a year, she goes, I don't have the impact. It's not what I thought it was. So, like a lot of our guests, they get to where they think they want to be, and then they pivot. I mean, and then the whole story of getting into becoming a franchisee of Another Broken Egg, opening the store 6 weeks before COVID, and then all the shit that happened there, they had to close down for whatever it was. I forget, it was 8, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever the, shutdown was. She built this system where she was hiring, they were like the 68th out of 75 franchises, in terms of metrics, every metric, basically. She hires people in recovery from addiction, as she built this system, and they moved from 68th to top, 1 to 5 in all metrics, so crazy turnaround. She buys another Broken Egg, her husband, but at this time they're separated, and, she's starting to turn everything around. And then, she took all the financial liability of the franchises, after the divorce, I guess. And her second location had these new tables that weren't heated correctly, I guess, and these Beatles.
The Beatles were
not George, Paul, Ringo, and John, but these Beatles were coming out, and she had 5 days later, which was or a day later, she declared bankruptcy, and that was 5 days before Christmas. Mm-hmm. And then a year later, she gets a W-2 job. She starts Shaw Enterprises, and this triggers, a not-for-profit with all her learnings. And it's a deep dive into kind of, development and learning. And she's just phenomenal. I mean, you do the editing, Joe, and you do a fantastic job, but I feel like I didn't even talk during the episode.
She just kept going. I just let it ride.
Yeah, because she's fantastic. I mean, like, she has her stuff down, and no, just delightful. I'm very grateful that I was introduced to her. And I just think she's going to do fantastic things.
Yeah, it was a very interesting interview to edit, because literally I just took my hands off the mouse and said, just keep talking, lady, because you're doing a great job.
Right.
It was amazing like that. I had heard before about Enterprise Rent-A-Car, that they are such a wonderful company to work for, and that they've gotten awards for best company to work for and everything like that. And I had heard that before, and one of the reasons why they're such a good company is because they will pretty much let you find your career with them, whatever you want to do. So if you want to just fill out paperwork all the time, cool, you can do that. If you want to be a manager at a location, they can make that happen. If you want to work in their corporate office, they make that happen. It's a very accommodating business, and that definitely showed here. It also showed that Britney, not only is a very flexible person, that she's able to bounce back from these things, but she bounces back rather successfully also. Yes, she worked for 7 years to be a pharmacy rep and then quit after a year, but that pivot right after that seemed to work out well, even though things kept getting thrown at her, and with bugs crawling out of the table, and with COVID coming up, and with domestic issues at home, she just kept bouncing back. I thought that was amazing. And one of the stories that she had that struck me was, she said when she became a mother, and they had to start feeding and taking care of this baby at home, that they would have spreadsheets to keep track of how much he slept and all that stuff. That's exactly what I did when my son was born. Is we had spreadsheets. We were scared to death about how to feed him, and we were scared that we were going to overfeed him and end up with a fat baby. Of course, we didn't. He's a very, very buff, fine young man right now, but at the time we were scared of that. So the doctor said that he is supposed to eat X number of ounces of formula a night, or whatever it was. We had that spreadsheet, and we kept track of the plus and minuses and the overages and the everything that we were doing. And when we would go into an appointment with the pediatrician, we would take those spreadsheets in with us. And
Wow.
we would show them, and we would say,
Yeah.
This is what this kid's doing. Is this normal? Is this okay?
Spoken like a data scientist. That's
exactly.
Yeah. There you go.
That's exactly what it was. And
Yeah.
I get an idea that that's exactly what Britney was referring to when she was talking about doing spreadsheets with her.
Now our app does all that for you, so it's all good.
This is way before apps, but at least I had Excel. And if I have Excel, I can rule the world.
Yeah, we thought apps was the potato skins at
there you go.
TGIF Fridays. Which those are two references that no one will get. That's under whatever,
They'll figure it
35
out.
years old. No, what a great story of resilience. Corey Bloom introduced us, and I thank her for that. But Joe, I haven't watched any comedy specials on Netflix, but give me something I can laugh about this weekend.
Here's something you can laugh about. We were talking about how wonderful Britney was as an organizer and everything. But I'll tell you one thing that I don't trust. I don't trust atoms, because they make up everything.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.